Welcome to Chew the Chat podcast.
Firstly, I just want to thank you for your time, making the time for us. It's really, we're grateful. It's a difficult time, so I do hope that it gives us something to do, if anything else. But listen, I welcome you to Chew the Chat podcast, Lehla and Anthony Eldridge. I found you guys via Instagram, of all places. And for viewers and listeners to Chew the Chat podcast, I've talked quite a lot recently in the last number of months about my wife's decision to take our small children out of school. My children are just recently 7, nearly 6 and 3. And we made the decision, which we've gone back and forth with since before the first one was born. We were never sure what we might do. Obviously, the situation that occurred in 2020 accelerated a lot of our fears and our instincts and sort of brought a lot of things into the light that we had always thought about. And then we made a decision to do it, to bring them out and to educate ourselves as best we can and to try and trust our instincts. And so grateful for finding pages like yours, books like yours, which we will get to, and a family like yours. Because it gives, such strength and knowledge and experience and motivation and all of the things necessary to take that leap into something I think we all trust deep down. But as we will get into in this conversation, the structure of education and the way we take the convention as the solid ground, and if we step outside of it, we can become, scared, essentially, as we were, and we are quite confident people, and it's quite an interesting feeling to think, oh wow, Jesus, do we trust ourselves here? And oh my God, so welcome, Lehla and Anthony. Jump, Fall, Fly. So that's the book. It's also your website. Am I right in saying it's also sort of like you're like a production kind of like a creative performing family? So give us give us some story on you guys.
We literally have run away and joined the circus in some senses.
And I suppose you could also say that the whole thing happened through unschooling in lots of ways, because we kind of it's a long story, isn't it? So it very much started through the way that we started following our kids and their passions, and how their passions and what they did influenced what we do. And so in a way, we've all been on a journey together for the last 9 years, which it was kind of unexpected. So what started with just taking the kids out of school developed into a whole kind of lifestyle that was not anything that we really had planned, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. We wouldn't have predicted where we've ended up, for sure. And I mean, many times we've sort of looked at each other and gone, oh my God, look where we are, look what's happened. We're in a caravan in Spain, and the kids, we're all living in a tent.
Yeah.
That's, that wasn't that wasn't predictable. As indeed, performing in a circus, performing in shows that we've created with our kids wouldn't have been predicted either. So
and nobody predicted that we would be learning how to stilt walk like a year and a half ago, being taught by our kids.
Amazing.
That's nuts, but we ended up doing it, so, and kind of really, really inspired by them, and wanting. So it's such a deep conversation, because we've ended up learning as adults so much more about ourselves and about life through them as well. So there's often, the progression. You start thinking that you need to teach them, and what can I teach them, and can I do this? And then suddenly, as time moves on, you realize it's a journey, and you can end up learning so much through just living with your kids, So it's a mindset really that has taken, well, I'll speak for myself, it took me quite a long time to shift into. At first it was really quite stressful, and I was anxious and all those things, and I was like, well, what do I know about this, and what do I know about that, and there was a whole process, and that is a de-schooling process, which is it's quite a journey. It's a real journey.
I think it's always, this conversation is always interesting. I'm really glad we got a bit of time together, because I've done a couple of podcasts recently where we had like 30 minutes, and it was
we can go as long as this takes. That's what I love about long form.
Where would you start? Because, in our book, really, we sort of set the scene, because basically if you're going to talk about learning and children, then you have to talk about parenting. And if you're going to talk about parenting, then you've got to talk about relationships. And if you're going to talk about relationships, you've got to talk about where you are having those relationships in society, and then you've got to talk about the world you live in. So it's a massive thing which keeps coming out, and it has a very deep philosophical element to it as well, which is, what do we believe about how we live? From what point of belief are we stepping into daily life? And as Lehla said, it sort of turned our conventional thinking, which I'm sure, that thing of, I'm going to have kids, let's put them in school, and it's all sort of pre-mapped out, isn't it? By just the way we've been raised. And then suddenly you come along and you say, well, maybe it doesn't have to be like that, but then you don't have a map.
Yeah, you don't have a map.
And then so that, you start looking around and saying, well, has anyone else done this? And then you realize that it's about philosophy. It's about what you believe deep down about life and about what it means to be an adult, not just what it means to be a child, but what does it mean to be a grown-up. I've been a lifelong learner myself. I am an unschooler. I love self-learning. I don't like being taught much. I mean, I like it sometimes, but I love to teach myself stuff. That predates what we did with our kids. So I think that's quite a good place to start, I guess.
Well, I would like to, because as Chew the Chat podcast in its origin was a lot to do with me coming to terms with my childhood and recognizing the trajectory of childhood from cradle to, often the age of 7 is talked about. And obviously we talk about the 7-year cycles and the imprinting of the fundamental foundations of personality and all these things in this time, and how all the aforementioned things you've said there, Ant, about, if we're going to talk about parenting, we need to talk about relationships, we need to talk about society, we need to talk about the wider world we live in, and all of these structures that are so rigidly in place that have so much momentum. I'd like to ask about you two, and a little bit further back, your younger years as children. Just take us briefly through what it was like for you growing up, and a little bit of history of how you two came together, and then we'll go from there, because I think that gives us a little bit of insight as to the kinds of people that you guys are.
Well, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, I can start. So I grew up in a family. Kind of, my dad's an artist and a lecturer, and so it was quite I suppose you could say quite an artistic family. And then we travelled a lot, so we lived in America for a while, and sometimes when I think back about my childhood, there was quite a bit of unschooling there, even though not consciously, because I was in the system. So yeah, I don't want to get too deeply into my parents' split, but so that was kind of quite traumatic around about the age of 11, around about the age of 10. So, and then going to my schooling, I think that for me, the whole schooling process was very, very frustrating, because I wasn't somebody and to this day, I'm not very good in the system. I found it really, really difficult. And I found that the way I was meant to learn and the way that was deemed to be successful and to be a good achiever, I wasn't good at that. And I was good at all the stuff, all the creative stuff, all the kind of, the alternative thinking. I could do a much better job as an artist, as a creator, as a writer, all those things. But I wasn't very good academically. I really, really struggled. So I found school very, very frustrating, and I found it difficult, but then I think I had a lot of good experiences with my dad and with my family around the arts and creativity and alternative ways of thinking. So I think I was quite fortunate in a way to be brought up in a household of kind of sort of deep thinkers and people who had a really high value for creativity, whereas sometimes I was floundering at the things at school, but then on the artistic side, I was really, really well supported. So that's kind of my childhood in a nutshell.
And Lehla, so just quickly, if your mum and dad in terms.
Give it all, Sam, if you like.
the relationship between mum and dad. Then I just we don't have to go there at all. But I'm thinking of you as a young girl prior to that 10, 11 years of age. And mum and dad, are they a tactile couple? Are they in love? Are you seeing love? Are you feeling love? Are you, as you mentioned, you're struggling academically, but are you?
Sorry, say the end of that question again.
So you also mentioned you maybe weren't doing great academically, but you were being you were privileged to be in an environment of deep thinkers and creativity. So were your parents sort of were they in any way measuring you via your academic prowess, or were they, no, it's cool because you're here and this is what we're doing, try hard and all that stuff? And what was it like? Were they, was it like I get from watching you guys, this loving together family that's in balance and in harmony? Did you feel that?
Yeah, they were very supportive. However I showed up academically, they were never tiger parents. They were never tough on me. And I think, and you asked if they were very in love and loving. Well, no, because they split up, So they were, I think, when I was much younger, I think they were, but it was quite complicated. But my mum left, and I was raised by my dad after the age of about 10, so that was a big trauma.
Okay.
So that was quite a trauma. And I think that I had a very strong connection with my dad, who I think also academically probably was quite similar to me and also struggled, but he managed to. He's an incredible artist, an incredible painter, and and a philosopher in the way he thinks. And I think I was very much held like that as a learner, and I think that that's served me a lot as a young person. And then also he used to run workshops, kind of crazy alternative workshops in Italy in the summers, and we'd have all these kind of dancers and painters and photographers and performance artists. So I was so blessed to be. I was immersed in a bunch of crazy, to be honest with you. And it was nuts, it was fun and it was nuts. And I often think of that as my education, because those years were so off the wall, and I was so lucky to be thrown into that at the age of 16, 15, 16, 17. And I used to just go, we never knew what would happen. And so I was fortunate to be thrown into a world, which is, as I think about it now, it's really unusual. And so I kind of I sometimes look, that is a reference point about my education, to have been given those riches, really, with all these alternative, wonderful people who I still know and who still support me. So I was very, very blessed. And they're kind of like my bigger family. So, and in a way, I think it's interesting how you kind of, as an adult, end up repeating what happened as a child. And in a way, I kind of think I try and offer that to my kids as much as I can. I try and offer them as much as I can for them to just see the world as not just linear. It's not just like this, that actually there's a whole kind of environment, and there's a whole bunch of people out there that do really alternative things. They can really show up in the world in a different way than you're expected to within a system. So I think I had a choppy childhood, but I think I was very blessed as well. I was very blessed with it. So that's
lovely. It comes through. I just seeing colour there, and lovely. And so how about you then, Ant? What was it like for you?
Well, I can't really follow that. I regret, I wish I had been living with a whole bunch of crazy bohemians, but I wasn't. So I I was born into a pretty typical middle class English family. My dad, he's still alive, was a professional land agent, estate agent kind of character, chartered surveyor. My mum was the housewife, and it started off really well when I was a kid, up until the age of about 4. But then our family fell apart because my mum became addicted to Valium and other drugs, and it sort of opened up a hornet's nest of addiction, which was actually in our family generationally. So in my father's mother, not in my dad, but my father's mother. So unfortunately, our entire family crashed and burned and broke apart and never came back together again. So at the age of 8, I was sent to live with relatives and didn't go back to live with my dad for 5 years.
Wow.
And by then, I got divorced. So, I don't want to get into details, but it was one of those sort of classical broken homes, sort of, torn apart by addiction and mental health illnesses. So not a good start, you could say. And inevitably, it's always interesting to sort of reflect on it, which I've had a long time to do, which is, I don't regret any of what happened, but, because I think I've gained more as a person than I lost as a child, if that makes sense. But, these things are never easy to understand, but it definitely made the first, I didn't really find my groove as an adult until I was in my mid to late 20s. And prior to that had been was pretty horrific. So I became addicted to alcohol and drugs, and ended up in rehab when I was 20. And I've been in recovery ever since. I've just passed my 40th recovery birthday.
Wow, and amazing. More power.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I've been involved for those 40 years, in helping people recover, and that's a whole another part to it. And I now, I now have a coaching business, and I do behavioural health coaching and training coaches and so on. So it all kind of worked its way out in this very much sort of recovery, consciousness related life, really. Because when I came out of that, the thing about dysfunctional families, I don't know your background. I hope I'm going to hear a bit. But when you live in a dysfunctional bubble, children normalize everything, and they don't understand that the world can be a different way. And I think this is the big insight that I had when, as I grew up and as I became sort of able to outward face as a teenager, it was kind of like, what? I used to go around to friends' houses and stand amazed at what the parents were doing. They weren't fighting. They weren't, the mother wasn't, I really used to be really genuinely shocked at how other families operated, because I was living in a particular kind of family situation with particular kinds of people with a lot of psychological issues. So I thought, I don't know what I thought as a kid. I thought, doesn't everyone behave like that? Aren't all families like that? And then I discovered, no, they're not. It's like that great thing that somebody once said. He said, I never realized my mother was a lousy cook until I left home. Right? So, it's the same. Yeah, I love that saying, because it sort of sums up. I never realized that you didn't have to live in fear of your psychological life every day of your life as a kid. There actually were adults out there who weren't dangerous to be around, who wouldn't try to shame, blame, or do do all those good things. So that gave me it gave me a couple of things, but I think one of the things that I have, which relates back to jump, fall, fly and being a parent, it's gave me a very, very strong sense of justice about children. And, one of the things I still feel like a very strong, core kind of focus is about, how can we be cruel to children? In whatever form that cruelty to children comes, whether we're hitting them or cursing them, you know what I mean? Like if I see people berating their children in the supermarket, calling them stupid, all that stuff, it's really it's really my work not to get involved all the time, if that makes sense, because I have this strong feeling, and I guess that's partly because I was on the receiving end of it. But the thing I think I'm lucky about was the time that I was born, because by the time I got to 16 and 17, it was punk, and I escaped quite quickly. I flunked out of school. I went to about 13 schools in my life.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Yeah, I was really going around lots of schools. And so I never formed attachments in any of them. And I became pretty skilled at surviving systems. I mean, I was surviving my family system. I became very skilled at surviving institutional systems. You know, I could suss people out in an instant. I knew how to play the teachers. I mean, I became an adept manipulator in a sense, in a very introverted way, out of the need to survive, you know, psychologically. So, but when I burst out of that, I burst out into a world which was, you know, glam rock and punk rock and all sorts of really amazing cultural experiences, and that just blew my mind, you know, and that's and I sort of set off into adulthood, you know, heavily wounded, but, you know, with a sort of sense of outrage and, you know, feisty resistance to being systemized, because what was happening in my family was a microcosm. The behavior between the adults and me was a microcosm for society at large, which is this idea that we will systemize you and you will conform.
Yeah.
You know, in my case, it was a dysfunctional conforming, but ultimately that's what all these systems are designed to do. They're designed to, you know, create conformed behavior and processes and conditioning in young people. And that's what, you know, I've really questioned and push against continually about, you know, how we form society. And we still are doing that at the moment. So I've slightly got off piste here, but I'm just trying to sort of join the dots back to my childhood. But my mum is 86 and in fine form. She's been in recovery 42 years. So she came out of that eventually.
Congratulations.
My dad is still alive. And my dad was my savior, really. My dad, for reasons which is really odd to think about, my dad decided to try to be like an English country gentleman. That was his like response to his, you know. And so he's a real hunting, shooting, fishing kind of guy.
Yep.
Which is really weird because his dad wasn't remotely like that. His dad was an architect, was a creative, you know, was a completely different kind of person, an intellectual and this kind of thing. And my dad wanted to become a member of the landed gentry, I think, but never quite made it. And so I grew up partly with my feet in that world as well. So we used to hunt and shoot and fish and do all those agricultural kind of things. Lived on a farm for a while. So I write about it a little bit in the book because it taught me quite a bit about life and our relationship to nature and all that kind of thing. But so yeah,
it's interesting.
It's a mixed bag.
It's so interesting, and your trajectory in particular, and it's very similar to mine. But listening to that, you know, that the home bubble and finding music and expression and freedom of thought and finding yourself in these other ideas that are freewheeling. Very, very similar to me. That seems like. So I think that gives us a little insight then as to, you know, you lovely people as you are today. You know, like I say, when I found your page, and for people on Instagram and stuff, it's Unschooling the Kids. The family you've built, as you say, what you lost as a child, you feel you've gained as an adult. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, my wife and I, we as I mentioned in the intro to this podcast, you know, the feelings that we have that you've obviously been through and had, you know, my wife and I, like I say, similar trajectory in our own childhoods, these strong feelings of trying to make sure that fierce understanding I now have, knowing when I see children, how important it is that we keep them safe and solid and beautiful and, you know, and in the stresses of life, it's really difficult when we're all under stress and we're trying to put food on the table and kids have broken that and they're banging this and they're running off there, but they're children exploring the world. And we have to remember that we have to guide that, and seeing your guys, your family in Instagram and the way you conduct it, and then listening to that there, your two stories has sort of led you into your adulthood, to me makes a lot of sense. How you've built this world now that kind of combats a lot of that chaos by simplifying in a weird way, just simplifying. So this has been such a strong thing, as you mentioned, Lehla, in the intro there, for you guys and in your life trajectory, because you've written a book, you've created a creative, traveling, productive, producing, acting, all singing, all dancing life with your children. As you mentioned, they're teaching you. So as you started, as you made the decisions, what was it that made the decision? How old were your kids? Did they ever set foot in school? And what was it that tipped you over the edge and, and made you think, let's do this?
Oh,
Gosh.
well, you see, there wasn't, I suppose there were a few, what I call aha moments, there were a few like light bulb moments, but I think we didn't really think about it until whilst they weren't at school. But when we start to look for a school, it was then that I started to sort of focus my mind on, oh yeah, this is school, because I hadn't been in a school for a long time. And it was really more of a process as the more we tried to engage, I tried to engage, more I tried to engage, more like going, not quite sure about that. And starting to feel this dissonance really in myself about what was going on. And then, of course, they started to respond. Some people would say because I was feeling dissonant, they were responding like that. I don't really know. But they weren't really enjoying it that much. And there were some markers, there were some moments on the sort of trying to get our kids into school journey where, they were objecting to what was happening to them.
Yeah.
And, conventional wisdom was, well, of course they do. You just take them in, force them in, and they'll get used to it.
People said that a
People
lot.
would say
People
that.
would say that.
Yeah.
Just force them in. And
Yeah.
I was always like, hang on a minute, that's not normal. Is that?
Well, it's normal. It's normal in a conventional sense because that's what all the parents are doing.
Yeah.
But we're thinking, I've got just this huge why in my head. Why?
Yeah.
To what end? Do you see what I mean? To what end am I doing this? I mean, and it became very much for me that, like, whose team am I actually on? I think that parents often don't realize this. If you're going to be on a team, you're on team parent, right? Which is with the kids. How, in a choice point, who are you going to back? The kid or the institution, or you know what I mean? And I realized that's a very complicated question, because what we're really told is you've got to back the system over your kid. That's the message. This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
This is the way we're doing it. I'm sorry your kid doesn't like it. You're going to have to go along with us and make your kid do that. And that just I just couldn't square that. Yeah. I couldn't square that away. If that makes sense. Yeah. And so we started talking about it.
Yeah, it wasn't kind of like a decision prior to them going to school. It wasn't kind of like we're going to not put them through the system at all. It was very far from that, And you see in the book, it's a bit stop-starty because they go into a system for a while and then we kind of go, that's not working. Let's homeschool them. So then I do the whole homeschooling where I'll create the school system
in the home.
which is
we'll get into that in a minute. That's hilarious.
And then then they go back in and then they come back out. And so there was a kind of a stop-starty, chopping, changey. And we also moved around a lot. So it wasn't kind of one day we just went in that. Well, actually, there was a point where we just, So we kind of toyed with it when they were little quite a lot. So they were home for a while, and then they were in the system. Also, bearing in mind, we were in South Africa and we were in a quite an old-fashioned system, and they were in an Afrikaans school and in the English class, and it's very strict. You know, it was a very strict school.
Just like a cane by the door job.
Yeah,
Wow.
you know. It's very strict, and that was quite an extreme thing to put them into, you know, where they'd have to line up and they'd have to make sure that their hair didn't touch their collar, and I was just like, what is going on, you know? So there was some kind of very strange moments there, but I think for a couple of things happened for me personally. I went I was doing some work with a woman, and I was really fortunate enough to go on tour, because I write and I illustrate, and I toured to Mozambique with this woman from America. It's a long story, but she met us. We ran a cafe and a restaurant in South Africa, and she came into the restaurant, and we ended up becoming friends. And she asked me, would I come to Mozambique with her? And we went around villages, helping kids learn to read and teaching them about this book. Anyway, teaching them about literacy. And it was a great experience, but she was really inspiring for me, because she started talking to me about Summerhill. Do you know about A.S. Neil and Summerhill?
No.
Which is, okay. Oh, you got a treat coming your way,
Here we
Sam.
go.
Okay, well, actually, Summerhill is a book written by A.S. Neil. He started a school, I think, in the 40s. He was he was ahead of his time and a really alternative thinker. And Summerhill still runs to this day. And it's a school with self-directed learners, and it's fantastic. It's amazing. So this book was written, I think, in the 40s or the 50s. A.S. Neil, Summerhill, brilliant book.
Make a note of that, Aidan.
It's it's dated, and there are some bits that are a bit questionable in it now. But you know, if you seeing it for its time, it was an incredible book. Anyway, she suggested she had the book, I think, with her. So I got it on the way back. I can't remember, but I read the book. And it was like, this is it. You know, it was as if I hadn't kind of I knew what I felt, but nobody had ever written it. And it was like, he's saying what I've been thinking. You know, this is it. And I remember coming back from that trip, and I mean, the kids were quite little at that point. And I remember giving the book to Ant and saying, this is how I feel about the system. This is it, you know. And so that kind of got us both thinking, it got me thinking, people have done it differently for quite a long time, and you can do it differently, and it can be an amazing, amazing experience. And, you know, do not be scared. People have done it before you.
Yeah.
That was very liberating for me to read it.
That was definitely a focal point. I think actually we'd actually had that book in our library for a while, but we hadn't actually read it. I can't remember how. Yeah, that's right. Because it was one of those weird coincidences that you said to me, you know that book, and I was like, oh yeah, we've got that in the library, and I started reading it before you came back. But what's interesting, I think, so Summerhill is very instructive in many ways, because it's fundamentally about the philosophy of running a school, but it's still a school. And what we ended up with doing was unschooling, which is essentially choosing to live together as a family without an institution to interact with. But we didn't realize we were headed there, but we certainly were thinking, you know, there were a lot of the sort of you know, what I call the holy cows of you know, came tumbling down, because you know that thing, you know, children won't learn anything unless you make them. Yeah. Right. You know that. Have you ever, you know? Yeah. Well, they don't want to do anything. You know, no, they really don't. You know, that's children for. That's why we make them go to school and we make them learn. You know, and I sort of bought into that. I think psychologically, and then this guy comes along with this book with Summerhill and goes, no, that's completely wrong.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh yeah, and the things were, you know, that belief just like fell over. Yeah. Clunk on the ground. And of course, then it's always the way, isn't it? With hindsight, you just think, oh God, why didn't I realize that before? It's so obvious that children want to learn. It's so obvious that the problem is that they don't want to learn. It's just that they don't want to learn what you want them to learn when you want them to learn it in the way that you want them to learn it. problem. It's a power struggle.
Yeah.
And quite rightly and naturally, they resist.
Yeah.
As indeed I would resist if you came around and told me how to learn, what to do, how to do it without my consent. And and that's what I often say to adults. Say, would you, if you were an adult, tolerate the way that you're treating this child? Oh no. So why are you treating the child like?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. You know what I mean? So there were these kind of fundamental ideas that A.S. Neil said, or just let them learn when they want to learn. So that he has this place. We've been there twice because we very nearly sent the kids.
We went there 3 times.
3 times.
Yeah. It was amazing.
And there's all these classrooms. It's a whole school, and you go in, they're empty, and there was a teacher sitting in there. And you go, and you say, "Who are you?" And you go, I'm the maths teacher. What do you do? Well, I just wait for a kid to turn up and wants to talk about maths.
I love that.
It's amazing. And then you say, well, do the kids turn up? And say, well, sometimes they do. Sometimes they turn up for a day. They turn up for a week. Sometimes the six of them in the physics class, in the science lab, they'll all come in here and we'll all make go-karts for 3 months.
It was amazing.
And then they all leave.
Yeah. And the maths room was like really inspiring for me because it was, I was like, oh, wow, we're in the art room. And I was thinking, and then I saw these numbers everywhere. And then I realized it was the maths room. And of course, maths can be art. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? Because I'm not very good at maths, which is actually possibly not true. I could be brilliant at maths. Who knows? Do you know what I mean? Maybe I'm conditioned to think I'm crap. Do you know what I mean? But I walked into that maths room and I just thought, I want to spend time in here. And I'd never in my life gone into a maths classroom feeling inspired. I went in there and I was so shocked because they do it creatively, they do it differently. And what was very, very beautiful about Summerhill, we could go on about Summerhill.
Well, let's talk about it because
really important. Yeah, I can see the enthusiasm.
Which were really vital. So I don't know which ones you want to talk about. I'm sure they're the same one.
Okay, well, we went. The lovely thing when we first went, maybe the second time or the third time when we went to Summerhill, we were met by the kids. I just want to. Every time we were met by the kids. I just want to backtrack on or go reference something that Ant said. You said something like, "How could we? How?" You were kind of critical. I can't remember, but what I want to say is that it's so we have all been systemized. We've been in the system, so it's as an adult, it can be really challenging to try and
break that momentum.
You have to unlearn. So of course, we don't know how to easily flow at first with our kids. Of course, we don't know how to trust because we've spent from the age of 4 up to whenever in a system, so that is the main thing with unschooling, with learning to unschool, is that you bump up against yourself a lot. I bumped up against myself. So anyway, I'm going to give you an example of me bumping up against myself. So we turn up at this school and there's just kids and the kids go, "Hi, how are you?" And I'm immediately looking for the adults. Like, where are the adults? Do you know what I mean? Who's what?
Who's making sure this is all okay?
Asked to go into the reception room.
Yeah, they're really organised.
And we're all standing there, all these sort of wannabe parents, and in come 2 teenagers.
And they're on it,
but they start to teach. But we're waiting for the teachers.
Yeah.
But their teachers don't come. The kids say, "Right, we're going on the tour now."
And I'm like, and there's that part of me just constantly looking for somebody, for an adult. And then I said, the penny drops, and I'm thinking, this is the experience. The kids are this is why we're here. And then I'm like, of course. And we don't see an adult until late in the afternoon. We kind of might see one in a room, but the adults aren't really engaging with us that much. It's the kids. And it was so mind blowing to me because it's so obvious in retrospect, but at the time it was a real jolt. I was looking for the adult to tell us how the school runs.
Because that was the model. You see, every school we'd been to before, we'd ring up and say, "We'd like to come and see the school and bring our kids." And we'd be met by the teacher, head teacher or the sub-head teacher or a teacher. So we were expecting the same model.
Yeah.
And what we got was these brilliant, very confident, smart, look you in the eye. Not
people pleasing
teenagers,
at all. Not people pleasing, not kind of deferring to because you're an adult looking up to you. None of that. Looking at you on a level. And that's really interesting as well. What just skipping on a bit, what I found with kids that are self-directed learners is they really will talk on a level with adults, not in just because they don't put themselves down or they don't kowtow. And it can be quite a challenge. It can be, for some adults, it can be really challenging because we're all systemized, we're all systemized. So it's a very interesting journey for oneself as a parent. And
So that's a really, can we dig in there? Can I just dig in there?
Of course.
Because it's what I call the culture of deference, right? So when you go to school, you think about it, what happens with young people is that they're put up to authority figures. This is your teacher, you do what they say. This is, you know what I mean? This is the environment. These are the rules. And so to some extent we have that at home, don't we? We create boundaries for our kids for all sorts of reasons. Some of which, with hindsight, you realize if you're an unschooler, you realize a lot of those boundaries you put up have got nothing to do with the kids. They're all about you, right? And some of them are about the kids. Like, for instance, if you've got toddlers, you've got to keep them safe. So you need to, the things you need to teach them quickly, which are around personal safety and these kinds of things, that's necessary. So, but then after that, there's this kind of idea that there has to be this culture of deference. And so that basically leads into fear of authority. So in the school, what you get is children who are scared of teachers. And some teachers, I would argue, the not very good ones, use fear as the governing emotional field of their relationship with the kids. And other more enlightened teachers won't do that. They'll make love and connection the governing field, which is obviously more desirable. But there's still a big stick in the background, where the headmaster's going to come and talk to us and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So what you get is young people who start to mistrust adults because adults are potentially harmful psychologically to them. Should I fear them? And over the years, we've often, when you meet unschooled kids, you see a really clearly different quality of how they're holding themselves to adults. There is none of that fear. There is none of that default suspicion, slightly, okay, hi, how do you do? Yeah. You know what I mean? And I noticed that when we meet our daughter's friends, that, this is my dad, and some of them sort of like, who I've been in school, they're a little bit like, oh, a dad, what do I do? It's a dad.
Yes.
And the unschooling ones don't do that. They go, oh, hi, they'll come up and say, hey, listen, I'm Anthony, I'm Mari's dad. This is Lehla. And they go, oh, nice to meet you, and they shake your hand. It's a very open feeling. Yeah. And I can't overemphasize how significant this is for life outcomes because, once you get an entrenched fear of authority, now people who like to, a lot of people argue with us about it, say, but we need fear of authority, otherwise we'd have anarchy, wouldn't we? Well, I would argue no. I think that's just another belief that we have, which justifies the control. But ultimately, when you see young people growing into adults who don't live constantly in this sort of fear of authority, scared of the police and scared of this and scared of that, you have a very different human being, actually. You have a very different, thing of life. And we've seen that amazingly in our kids, who are just fearless. They just, shock me with their fearlessness because I wasn't like that. 16, taking on my teachers and, whatever. And that really came out of, I just wanted to link that because I think it's an important thing that came out of the penny really dropped for me when I went to Summerhill.
So that meeting.
Do you remember we met all those wonderful teenagers and we just were talking to them? I was going, oh my God, saying to Lehla, look, these kids are incredible.
They're relaxed, young people, they're comfortable,
they're willing to talk to me. I'm a grown-up male, bald male, and they're talking to me and asking me questions about myself. I'm like, what?
Yeah. And also just going back to that, they do something, I can't remember what it's called. It's like the committee meeting.
Oh no, the democratic meeting. This will blow your mind.
This is so beautiful. First of all, they asked the group of about...
But Lehla, let's tell him how they run the school first so he gets the context.
Okay, go on.
They run the school. This is another brilliant thing. The school is not run by the teachers. It's run by the kids. Everything is decided through democracy, through weekly meetings, which they have, where anyone of any age in the school can bring up any topic, they discuss it, debate it, and vote on it. That's how they run the school. the teachers don't make up the rules. All the pupils, all the kids do. So they have more rules at Summerhill than any other school. They have this massive book, and if you look at it, it's sort of hanging on the wall in the dining room. And you can go and you can look at all the rules. And it's hilarious. It's very interesting.
It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was about 100, maybe 100 kids there. Would you say maybe
maybe
60 kids? And they have this meeting, and they ask the kids. Some of the parents who are at the open day would like to come sit in the meeting. Do you agree? So we had to wait outside. And I'm thinking, I don't want to go in. What if they say no?
Isn't that great? All the kids have to give their permission for us to be in there. Isn't that cool?
And then I'm like, then the condition part of me is like, I've come all this way, I want to go in. And then the other part of me thinks that's brilliant. If they say no, fair enough. Do you know what I mean? So they said yes, and all the parents were like, So we sat in the circle, and it was just brilliant. I mean, it was just brilliant. There was this 6-year-old that got up and she spoke about the fact that somebody's spraying aerosol cans in the bedroom and it makes her cough and she doesn't like it. And what do we think about air? And it was just so organized, and they were so fair, and everybody had a voice, and it ran so smoothly. I mean, you would imagine, the condition part would think that would be chaos. It was brilliant, and I was so moved.
Yeah.
I was just
I actually wept. I mean, I cried because it was so. It was so beautiful to see this little 6-year-old. I remember this moment, this little 6-year-old saying, putting her hand up, saying, I want. And she walks to the middle of the room. She says, right. So there's in front of this room, I'm thinking, wow, the confidence, this moment of democracy, the fact that she has the power to express what she wants to express, and no one's shutting her down, and no one's saying no. You know what I mean?
To be heard, to be heard.
It was really, really beautiful. It's really beautiful. And so that was a real big inspiration to us. And, one would think, why didn't we send our kids there?
Well, that's another story.
Yeah, which maybe we should just say. Yeah, it's actually not.
Is that in the UK, guys? Are you in the UK at this point?
You can go and visit it.
It's a private school and you have to pay for it. So we didn't have that kind of money.
But also there's a problem this is interesting. So a lot of the children that are going to Summerhill are children, are problem children who failed in the system. And they often...
That's not always the case. That's Summerhill, is it?
If you read the book, most of the children he's getting given are children that aren't coping. And what they've discovered is that Summerhill is such an amazing environment that the kids don't ever want to leave. And a lot of them don't want to go back home.
We didn't want to lose our kids.
Yeah, because you can be a day kid or you can be a boarder. And the headmistress then, who's very nice, the original founder's granddaughter. Daughter. Said, listen, one thing you need to know is that if your kids come as day kids, be prepared for the fact that they will want to become boarders. And she says some of them want to stay here all during the holidays. Because what happens is this becomes such a powerful community and family where they're having their best time.
Yeah, I get it.
You can't compete with it at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was brilliant. She was really honest. Yeah. She was really straightforward. And we both sort of thought, no, we don't.
Well, I didn't have children to hand them over to a school permanently and not live with them. I mean, I had kids to live with them.
Exactly. So that family pot for us it was a big this isn't going to work for us, and but I mean the kids there do have an amazing time.
Well, it sounds like you guys learned so much from it and have taken that that spirit, because listening to you there talking about it, and I had a similar moment with a book myself, but it was a little bit later on the I think it was the 60s, John Holt, How Children Learn. So I had that moment with the book where, as you eloquently put it, Lehla, enthusiastically, like, that's it, that's my feeling, that's what I've been, sort of the turmoil in my heart, mind has been, this man has written this book because he's done all this work and he's scientifically or academically, in a way, put this down, like, this is it. How children learn. And everything you've just said there in Summerhill is freedom, to be unshackled, to feel safe, and as you point out, and this is a really poignant conversation at this time, I think, in our lives because where we're at with the situation we're in with kids learning at home right now. And this is something I want to get to with you guys, is we are institutionalized. The system is so much bigger than us, the individual. You know, we even people like yourselves, Lehla, you've come from that part in your early teens where you've had this freedom and this colour and these eccentrics and this father who's allowed you to be more than what the system says you should be. It's such a scary thing to break that mold, and for so many families who haven't got that creative sort of belief or understanding or intuition, if we're not inside that structure, inside that system, we're failing somehow. And as you mentioned, you're butt up against yourself with the unschooling. So when Alex and I first, my wife Alex first said, you know, we're going to homeschool, we go, okay, right, we'll start learning, right, homeschool. And I think it was in the first lockdown where everybody was trying to turn the classroom into the kitchen, you know, and at 9 o'clock we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that at 10 o'clock, and then we're going to learn about. And you realise, oh, this is just chaos. I mean, this is just not going to work. Yeah. And then I read John Holt, and I was like, oh, wow. You know, and luckily we had a friend in the village who my wife had met in the park, and they'd unschooled for sort of 7 or 8 years, very similar to you guys. And they came round and had a chat with us and said, look, trust yourself. Child-led. You know, if they're interested in something, you just follow that. And if you're overjoyed to be with your children, you know, you're pretty much there. And so that was really, really big for me. So as we get to where we are now then, guys, on the timeline today, where our systems are resetting, let's say, you know, in the face of public health or whatever else it might be, we are resetting the human condition at this moment, you know, and all these systems as we know them. And right now, children aren't in school, and parents are up and down the country and around the world, no doubt, are really at loggerheads with how do they do this. They're probably, I would imagine the majority are just scared that their children are going to fall behind and they're going to lose out, when actually some of those parents who might come across this interview, I hate the word interview, this conversation, it might help them to grasp that internal instinct that actually this could be a silver lining in many cases, you know, if people are in a position where they can be around their children and trust. So when you guys did take the kids out, Lehla, you sort of alluded to it earlier, you tried to do the thing that we all do, which is create the school environment, but at home. And then you battle with yourself. So how long is it, and what is the process for you guys to really arrive at the point where that trust kicks in and you're just following your nose, and you find yourself in a place where the children are teaching you as much as you're doing anything for them?
Well, can I?
Do you want to jump in?
So Sam, like you said, I totally, and I kind of look at it and go like this now. Oh, no.
Well, can I just say, Lehla, though, but your videos on Instagram, though, where you talk about this, where you sort of kick yourself and, you know, this is for you guys, you know, don't worry when you feel like this. That's so helpful to me. You know, so thank you.
Okay, and I get a lot of feedback because I think it's huge that, like I said before, we've all been conditioned, haven't we? We've been conditioned to, your kids won't learn unless you teach them. Your kids won't learn unless you teach them, or if a teacher teaches them. So what I did is I did exactly that. I literally created a room we both did. We created a room in a house, and I turned it into a flipping classroom. I mean, like, it looked great. You know, it looked great. And I had other kids come join, and I was like, I am acing this. And then I had I put the art on this bit, and then I put the science on this bit, and I put the geography over there, and do you hear what I'm saying? I put. And then I had a whiteboard, and the kids were like, you know, and I even kind of almost had a register in the morning. I mean, it was, do you know what I mean? It was like, and I had the pencils, and I had the rulers, and I had the books. I had a stack of books like this. And then it took, and I think Ant was a bit more savvy than me, to be honest. He used to just say, I come from a family of teachers as well. So he used to say, I would say at night before I went to bed, what shall I teach them tomorrow? And he would say, why don't you just let it go? I can't let it go. I can't let it go. And then I had a kind of moment where they're all just like going, oh, and I'm trying to enthuse them and say, so what should we do today, kids? You know, should we do a bit of art? And they're just like, oh, I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. You know what I mean? And then I sort of said, what do you guys want to do? You know, what do you guys want to do? And they wanted to sort of go online and do their own thing. And something happened. I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was a moment when they were working on a project. We were working on a project about NASA. Oh, aliens, about space and aliens. And I said, what do you want to do? One of the boys, we were in Italy at this point, actually. So just in context, we were with Italian kids and English kids. And one of the kids said he wanted to learn about aliens. So are there aliens? And I said, well, find out, you know, just go on the internet. And I realized I had to step away. Just let Lehla walk away, stop being in control. Because I was kind of doing that teacherly thing of monitoring them. But, you know, and I was getting on their nerves and I was getting on my own nerves because I was wanting results. Do you know what I mean? And then I walked out and I left them for like an hour, and then I came back in, and they were looking at jellyfish. They were looking at jellyfish, and they're all sitting around the computer looking at jellyfish. And I'm thinking, wanting to say, what about the aliens, guys? You know what I mean? What are you talking about the aliens? Where's your written report about the aliens? And then I thought, Lehla, just leave it. And then what had happened is they'd looked about aliens, and they'd gone into NASA, and they'd gone from NASA to how things in space were like jellyfish and things in space were really similar. And how does a jellyfish move across glass? And then they had, then they'd gone to Rihanna, like a diamond, all about being in the sky. And I was like, it kind of blew my mind because I was like, linear. Let's do a topic about the aliens, write about it and let me know, or, you know, give me a result, guys. And actually what they'd done in that hour or 45 minutes is they'd gone from aliens to NASA to the sky to learning about jellyfish to learning about music and all in 2 languages as well. And I actually thought, jeepers, that's a learning explosion. Do you know what I mean? And it's very hard to kind of quantify what that was, but there's learning going on in all different directions. There's music over there. There's kind of science, you know, following NASA over there. There's somebody, you know, it was going all over the place. They were all going all over the place. And that was a very poignant moment for me because I suddenly went, it's not linear. Learning's not linear. Learning is everything. Learning is multifaceted. It goes in all directions. And it was and then I looked and I just remember it was like something dropped to me. I looked around the room and then I kind of got that, oh God, it's me. I've done this classroom, not them. You know, I've tried to control them. I've tried to create this space and I'm not listening to them. And then from that moment, kind of everything shifted. I dismantled. I took things off the wall. I just started listening. I just thought, Lehla, give it up, babe. Give it up. You know? And I kind of, there was a part of me that's like, no, I'm not in control, you know. And I started following them. And I really think that for me, that was the emotional point. And how long did it take? It took maybe a year, took maybe 6 months. Maybe it's even a lifetime, Sam, because I still catch myself doing it, you know. And but it's something shifted in me. And then I started following them. And then it got really interesting. And
fun.
And really fun.
Because after all, you know, I mean, the whole point is it's not supposed to be miserable.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be joyful. I mean, that's what I'm there for. I'm there for the joy of being with my kids, not the suffering of being with my kids.
Yeah.
So when it became joyful, then it became what it became really was it when you let go and finally, you know, crashed and burned.
I crashed and burned.
What happened was we started to play again. Because we were still in this duality of there's learning and then there's having fun and enjoying yourself, and then there's learning. And so learning is correlated with suffering, right?
Yeah.
It's like a duty, it's suffering. And so that's the problem, isn't it? That's the institutionalization of learning. So when you just say, and then John Holt talks about this a lot, there isn't a wall down the middle.
Yeah.
It's human expression. And you learn as much playing. And in fact, you learn more playing. So we just played, and then you started dressing up. You dressed up. The kids dressed up for about 2 years, didn't they? It was constantly doing fancy dress and doing puppet shows, and it was just nuts.
And we were throwing in all sorts of ideas about history, and and I would strew things. So I would strew ideas, which means throw something out there. Talk about Amelia Earhart. I'd throw it out there. If it flew, it flew. If it didn't, I would accept it.
I mean, this is actually another very important point, because a lot of the objections that we hear from people, they say, well, if you don't teach your children about biology, how will they ever know? How will they learn? Well, that's a very good point. I mean, if a child doesn't come across something, it can't have a moment of interest in it. So what we do in unschooling, and is we seed the environment, with interesting things. Yeah. Just leave a book about aeroplanes on the table, and the kid comes up and goes, "Oh, what's that?" And this is a very important thing as well, because and it is important that young people learn about what's out there as options, not to be taught it, but the chemistry exists. Oh, what's chemistry? Do you know what I mean? But there's a huge difference between saying, oh, there's a thing called chemistry. Wow, that's interesting, versus you will now learn chemistry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is
for 30 minutes at 3:00 until, and then you'll go and learn. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say also was there's something important about what you were saying there to do with the way that learning happens, because one of the things that I really observed is that we have this bias institutionally to forcing what I call deep dives into things, so it's kind of we're going in and then we're going in and then we're going in and we're going in, and there's somehow an inherent good about going in to things as a sort of absolute good, but it isn't an absolute good. And what I've noticed a lot was this thing, what I call buffet learning. Mm-hmm. Buffet learning is when you go to,
multiple things at once. Yeah.
I think I'll have a sausage roll and I'll have a little thing. Oh, I'll have a kind of cheese, and then you know what I mean? And you go around the room and you've eaten and you've consumed, but you haven't had, whereas then there's let's have a feast. Let's have an Italian feast, and let's have, do you know what I mean? And let's go right down the thing, and you sit there and I'll deliver your feast for you. And that's a very different thing. And what's most of the educational philosophy is about, you sit down there and I'm going to feed you.
Yeah.
All right. And it takes away autonomy of psychological learning and the nurturing aspect, the self-nurturing aspect of being able to select what you learn. And that looks interesting. This is what I loved about that story was, to go from aliens to NASA, and they're just bouncing, and they're like in this buffet, bit of that, bit of that, bit of that, and they're what they're seeing, which I think is so inspiring, so much. And it's also what your dad is about, and artists and creative. They're seeing the interconnectedness of all things.
Of everything. And I just want to...
That is such an important human position, if you like, to take, to see the joined upness of the world and not see everything as constantly encapsulated in little pockets, niches, all that kind of thing. This is something I get very passionate about in the work that I do, about behavioural change in behavioural things. So
I just want to say that the kind of cherry on the cake of that story is the following day afterwards. So if you imagine, we've been looking at jellyfish, and they've been looking up into the universe, and the following day, one of the Italian boys comes in with a Venus flytrap plant, because it reminds him, he's looked at Venus, he's looked at the jellyfish, and I'm like,
he's made that connection into,
There's the connectivity, interconnectivity of everything.
But just think about that for a moment. Really. It's brilliant. We're now in biology, right?
Yeah. So
everyone's gathered around the Venus flytrap. I remember it turning up and saying, "Well, what is it?" Well, it eats flies. What do you mean it eats flies? So now we're having an impromptu, botany moment. Right?
And it linked back to the aliens. We're like, well, could Venus flytraps be aliens? And do they eat people? Do they eat flesh? What about so it just goes.
And we didn't schedule botany for 9:30 in the morning.
No, you're following that instinct. That instinct and that sense of adventure.
So we're just letting it, and then somebody says things and off we go. And that when you think about you think how exciting that is for young people and for us as well to just go with the flow in that way.
Yeah.
And then we all run out of steam. It's like we all had enough, so let's all have a cup of tea, because sometimes the buffet, and then the girls sometimes would take, the buffet can be 5 minutes. Or it can be a day. Sometimes they get totally, totally hooked into something, and they'd be just doing it all day, literally, way beyond how long I would do it for. Cutting out and making paper swords and whatever.
Yeah, kids are endlessly inventive, as you know. I mean, they just run with everything, or not, So, but I wanted to tell another little short story. Can I tell another short story?
By the way, your enthusiasm, guys, is just electric. I love this pure, and I hope people watching and listening, I'm sure, who are paying attention at the moment, because what we said, we're at a time when we're all probably scared to death, a lot of parents, about having their kids at home. This energy, this pureness is so powerful.
It's getting rowdy. Before you tell your story, I mean, the big message really for anyone out there is we have, like you, we have skin in the game. We're 9 years down what was essentially a crazy experiment to most people. We can absolutely tell you that it can work. This is not a dangerous thing to do at all. Quite the opposite. And that's an important thing to say. And we could even bring our kids on here, our daughters. And you can talk to them. They're not weirdos. They're incredible human beings.
Our son is shy.
Yeah,
he's quite shy, so he won't come on here.
But I think it's important, because right now everyone's got anxiety that somehow something terrible is about to happen to their children. The thing that is happening to children that is most important to deal with right now is around mental health, about emotional processing, about connection, about relationship. That is the most important thing. The rest is peripheral, in my view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're going through a global pandemic. It's huge. There is a lot going on, and I think that mental health is just paramount. It's paramount to hold those kids within this space, And shall I tell my story?
Yeah, you tell your story. Then I'd like to talk about learning again quickly.
Well, will tie in. Right. It's a story around, and I might have said it on a little Instagram thing. It's a story around reading, which was something that I kind of was very, very passionate about, that the kids must learn to read. That's my vocabulary, that they really need to, which is actually...
Well, the world says that as well.
Yeah, the world says
the younger they can read, the more money they'll make.
Yeah, and I was, when they were younger, I was Biff and Chipped out, those little Biff and Chip books. I was like, it. But anyway, they none of them really were into reading, and I'm talking, and this will freak a lot of people out because it freaked me out. I'm talking up to the age of like 10. Just like. And I found it so important because I read, and because the world, you need to be able to read. I found it really important. But I was, and one of our daughters struggled with dyslexia. So, and when she was in a schooling system for a while, it was flagged up. She was held behind, and in special classes and everything. So when we were out of the system, my one concern was that they could all read and that she could read and that I assist her. So I help as much as I could. And sure enough, I did things like, I'll put words around the place, and just to kind of like get things going in their brain and help them add that ch is ch and t is, and all this stuff. But what I did is I really kind of insisted on helping her to read. Like, I followed her around to help her to read. Like, should we just do 20 minutes? Should we just do 10? Come on, let's just do 10 minutes. Go on, we'll be fine. And she would just be, and I could feel this like resistance, And she was like 9 or 10 and she wasn't really, really doing it. So I, inside as a parent, was like, oh my goodness, that's old. Why aren't you getting this? And then this voice said, Lehla, let it go. And then this other voice said, how can you let it go? She might never be able to read. And this other voice said, let it go. So, and it was really difficult, but I didn't let it go. I carried on chasing her around. Then she turned around and she said to me, Mum, can you do one thing for me? Can you just leave me alone? And then come back to me 6 months later, like 10-year-old. And inside, I said, no. On the outside, I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. And then I walked away, and I did. I left her. I stepped away. 6 months later, she's reading, like really reading. About 9 months later, about a year later, or maybe, a bit longer, not only is she reading, her and her sister, they're twins, went into this ridiculous deep dive of reading novel after novel after novel after novel after novel, to the point where it's like 2 a week. I mean, not we didn't make them. They were just on this roll. Like, this is what Anne was talking about, deep diving. And they, for 2 years, the girls read novel after novel after novel after novel after novel. To the point where they were so proud of it, they had a whole list on the wall, and I really, and so when I think back to myself in that moment when she was 9 or 10, and I listened to her, I just, it was a real turnaround moment for me, because I just thought, she's asking me to step away and just leave her, and it was really hard for me, and I did step away, and it worked, she came back. And not only can she read, I mean, she's still dyslexic every now and then. She'll still put things around, but it's fine. But the thing is, she has a passion for reading, like a passion for reading. And if I had motored on in the way that I was trying to, I think I would have stuffed that up for life, So when I said at the very beginning, you learn so much about yourself.
Yes.
I learned so much about, I learned that this thing about listening, you listen, just listen. And it's really difficult when you're in a system, because the system doesn't teach you to listen. The system teaches you to follow the system. So I have to say, I really feel for people who are feeling they have to follow a curriculum, because it's really, really, you can't do what you need to do. You can't follow your heart easily if you're following this curriculum. So I know it's a very difficult situation for people.
I was going to say, I mean, what Lehla's story really, the story she's telling with her stories is the story that it's all about the adults. Ultimately, it's us grown-ups. It's the adults who have the problem with the unschooling concept. It's not the kids.
Yeah,
kids are fine. People will say, I'm worried about it. Kids. Don't worry about your kids. Worry about yourself. Because really, the kids are self-adjusting, and they will find their relationship, as you go along. I guess one of the problems that we have is that as kids that have been in school need help adjusting to new environments, need to understand that they have to adjust. So just going back to Summerhill, because Summerhill's a good place to look for some clear direction. He talks quite a lot about what happens when kids who've been in school that hasn't worked out come to Summerhill. And the first thing they do is rebel. Because they're told, you don't have to do anything. They say, right, we won't. And some of them don't do anything for 3 years. They just play. They just do their own thing for 3 years. They don't learn anything formally or on the subject. And then eventually, once that's sort of out of the system, they've reestablished, this idea of feeling of autonomy, and the fact that their autonomy is sort of treated with respect and that it's sacred. Then they're willing to go out and to embrace and to engage. And I think that's a very important point, because I think, a lot of children who are suddenly finding themselves now, out of that goldfish bowl, school, even though they don't like it, it's still a foreign experience for them. It's still difficult for them. And if the parents are stressed, and if that is picked up by, children they just see everything, don't they? They see and feel everything. I mean, they're like sponges. So they know this whole idea that parents are, well, my child doesn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, really?
Yeah, that's so naive, isn't it?
They don't know that I'm really depressed. Why?
Oh, yes,
well, I always smile when I'm in the room with them. What? Okay. So I mean, these are the stories we tell ourselves, really, to because we don't want to confront certain issues. So what I'm saying is a lot of it is rooted in the adult, in how we're responding to the situation. But of course, we have to be mindful of this transitioning process for people. Children coming out of one institution and back into a different environment. Building on that, really what I wanted to just talk about quickly was I'm very sympathetic to the dilemma that so many parents have. And I think sometimes we can be a bit annoying because we sort of come in here and say, just have all your kids at home and live like us and do, as if it's something easy to do. It isn't easy to do because you have to be willing to understand that you can't live your life in a conventional way. It's very hard to be an unschooling family. You'll know this.
Yep.
I mean, if I was working 5 jobs from 6 a.m. till 10 at night, and so was Lehla 7 days a week, how could we possibly, so we don't want to be, I don't want to be flip about just sort of, saying it's easy. And I think that's respectful to people who aren't in the same situation as ours.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think we're all parents, most parents are trying to solve one fundamental question, which is what's the best thing to do for our kids, for them to thrive into the future. That's really, isn't it? It's the point of departure. How can I best equip them for the world in which they're going to live as adults? That's really the question we came up with, and it's in the book. And we try to answer that question by how we live, and we try to answer that question in the book. But, and it's an important question now because everybody's tied to the system's story, which is you got to win, you got to get top of the class, you got to get great grades because you got to get to uni because you won't get a job and you won't thrive if you don't. Yeah. Right. So it's like this sword of Damocles, isn't it? It's like if little Johnny drops out of the class, Johnny's life is over, and that's the way we are bound to the system. We're bound through this negative relationship about how life plays out. And so what's important to say, I think, is to say, and for people to talk about why that's not an absolute truth. Because if you think of it, this always struck me about classes, right? There's top of the class and the bottom of the class. There's only 2 places to be in a class, in my view, either at the top or at the bottom. Yeah. You never want to be anywhere in the middle. If you're top of the class, you're winning, you get all the praise and support. If you're the bottom of the class, everyone ignores you, they leave you alone, and that's fine. And I worked out when I was at school, I was going to be at the bottom of the class because I was lazy. I saw it was way too expensive to be at the top. So I figured out, and fortunately my parents weren't paying that much attention at the time. So I was like, and I hid out at the bottom of the class, which was really good. But if you think about it, not everyone can win. I mean, we can't all go to Oxford University, can we? No. Right? So the culture itself is about losers and winners. Yeah. Now, is that really the only way you're going to define as a parent how you feel about your kids? My kid must be a winner. If he's not, he'll be a loser. No. Is that it? I mean, if we were really honest with young people, we would, when we go into a class and say, here's the statistics, because I know what the statistics, they're out there in the public domain. There's 40 kids in this class. Let me tell you what's going to happen. 2 of you are going to jail. 40% of you are going to spend more than 5 years in continuous unemployment. You know what I mean? 3 of you are going to go to a top-level university. These are the statistics.
2 of them are going to jail.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you do statistics, if you study statistics, something like 35 to 40% of you will be obese by the time you're 35, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
That's the truth, right? But we don't play the truth game with young people. We play this conspiracy about you just work hard and do, you know what I mean? And it's a massive deception. And of course, what happens is kids go along with this whilst they're vulnerable, and then they eventually wake up and smell the roses because they start to learn for themselves, and then they realize they've been deceived and duped, which, you know, 5 million, is it 5 to 8 million people in their 20s with university degrees in the EU unemployed. A university degree is not a passport to a job or a life. It isn't. And there's these big deceptions that have been sort of brought about over the last 20 years. And it's really relevant, I think, for what's going on right now, because if you just take pause as a family, you say, what, you mean it's not about the exam? No, it's not about the exams. It's, you know, what is it about then? It's about social skills. It's about emotional intelligence. It's about the ability to self-direct. It's about the ability to adapt. It's about the idea that, you know, these qualities are now shown to be evidentially by research to be the qualities that you need to thrive in the future. Because a degree from a university isn't that passport that it was. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, totally, totally, yeah. And
I don't know. If you want to go and look at Google, I mean, Google, if you go and look at what Google look for, I mean, they put you through all these tests to go and work at Google. They're testing your emotional intelligence. There's, you know, spiritual quotients. They're testing all sorts of stuff, psychometrics. It's got nothing to do with what you know. I
was going to say, I feel like where we are now on the timeline with the way that the technological evolution is happening and the way that young people are communicating and the wider world, us as well, in our generations, you know, digital communication, I mean, probably in the future, remote learning is going to be a much, much bigger thing. As parents, and I know you talk about this in the book, you know, adapting with the kids online and online time, and your anecdotal story before pointed to that, Lehla. I've actually got a funny one as well, which I'll just drop now, which was my kids are kind of obsessed with Michael Jackson at the moment right now. I'm of the age, I'll be 40 on Monday. So when Michael Jackson was in full swing, I was my kid's age. Okay. So there's like the enthusiasm you guys have shown, like this is happening to me. So I'm watching we've come across YouTube, Michael Jackson's on, we're watching Thriller because they love werewolves. Okay. So I've learned enough from John Holt and from Alfie Conn's Unconditional Parenting as well to sort of trust my nose and whatever they're into, let's follow that. So they're into werewolves. Then werewolves made me think, oh, Michael Jackson, because I'm in bands, I do music, they love music. So I'm like, right, this is a double canon. So I show them Thriller. Well, this is it. The world explodes into dance. But what's amazing, as you said about that buffet and about this connection of emotional intelligence. So we're probably 6 months into this. I mean, and parents at home listening and watching will know that, you know, your kids at whatever age are into Thomas the Tank Engine for a period, then they're into Bob the Builder, or then they're into Frozen, and these periods of absolute immersion happen. Well, this Michael Jackson one is the biggest one we've had. Now, obviously, when I'm telling friends, the first thing we joke as adults is, oh, you know, you've got to be careful there, blah, blah, blah. When, you know, how do you get around that? And it's like, well, you don't, because you're just celebrating the dancing and the music. And as a parent, I'm kind of thinking, God, should I be dancing to this and all these things? But what's amazing is they are immersed in this movement, in this enigma of this music and this man. But then they start to, in all the different video searches that they're doing, and we're dancing to the music, and Indigo wants to dance to this one and Jesse wants to dance to that one. They're all mastering these different tracks. Then they start asking questions about why does he look different? Okay, so then we start veering off into, and I and my wife are of the policy that we talk to them, as you mentioned at the Summerhill place, the kids are talking to you like adults. We talk to them. I don't sugarcoat anything. At the end of the day, Bambi dies. That's what happens. This is life, and it's okay, you know. So they asked the questions about why, you know, they found a video, which is a photograph of Michael Jackson. Yeah, Bambi's mum dies. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Excuse me.
It's all right, Anne. How could you ruin it?
So they found a video, which is kind of a timeline thing of pictures of Michael Jackson from sort of baby to 50. And they're mesmerized because this is an absolute transformation, obviously. What's happened? So my wife and I would say, well, Michael Jackson had surgery, you know, and it spins off into this, well, what surgery? And they had their little minds. And then, you know, we talk about the public eye, the perception of him. He's 5-year-old. He was a phenom. He was a prodigy. He was this, you know, the world was watching. It wasn't like now when you got the internet, all this stuff. It was one channel. It was one radio station. It was his family, you know, his brothers. And this whole thing's going off in all these different directions. And they're, you know, they're mesmerized by the emotion, the human emotion. Why would somebody want to change their face? And and knowing what I know now, and again, you've bolstered it for me, and I hope for people watching and listening to trust that learning isn't about sitting down, being quiet with a pen and paper and getting it right and hitting the grade or whatever. It's about that journey of whatever the inspiration is that captures you in that moment, whatever it is, whether it's the jellyfish and then the space and then the plant and the, you know, and trusting that this thing is happening. I mean, the reading anecdote you gave, Lehla, my friend who came to give us a chat, Nick, who in our village, who are unschooling their kids, because that, I think they're a couple of the key things that people think about when we're going to unschool or homeschool is socializing and reading and maths. Yeah. So I was a bit like reading, you know, we read a lot. We read to them. They love reading and we read and we kind of trust that that'll happen. But my friend Nick said, I said, what about reading? You know, how are you doing it? What's a day look like? He said, well, my boy's 7 or I think 7 or 8. He said, he's taught himself to read. And he sort of said it like that. And I went, right, okay. And he went, well, he loves Star Wars and we'd watch Star Wars. And then we got him the Star Wars book, you know, just enormous novel pack, and he read it. He's read it like 3 times, and I'm like, well, he said he just read it, you know. And then when I listen to John Holt talk, and you start to learn about how they're absorbing everything all the time, and they're trying to reenact what the adults are doing, and they've something John Holt said that really stood out to me, because my middle boy Jesse, he's left-handed, and he seems to write things, you know, often spelt correctly, but completely going backwards, right? And he's doing these 3s. And once upon a time, I'd say, oh, no, not Jesse, not like that, not like this. And then John Holt said something quite poignant, which was, to him, that is a 3. He knows what that is, and it represents that to him and how he's presenting it to the world. And he will self-correct over time because he reads this or sees that. And for me to stand back and not, you know, so these things, I mean, I've digressed a little bit there, but what I'm coming back to is a couple of those key things for people listening and watching at home that I hope this is a really useful and you know, energized conversation for them to be part of, is that we're at home with the kids, to trust ourselves, you know, to trust these children. And those couple of key things about socializing. I mean, obviously the socializing one right now is very difficult, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I did want to ask you guys about how you do that, and we'll come to that in a moment. And obviously the reading and the writing, but all of it comes back to the trust, I think, just trusting that they are little wizards who are just sucking it all up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Can I just want to make another point about learning? And I'll just tell you a story. So let's go back, sort of 2.5, 3 years. So once our girls got to a certain age, obviously over time they're learning about the world and they understand there's things called exams. We never made them take an exam ever. Okay, I mean they did at school, but we never did, and we never sided with the school about the exams. We were just like whatever. And then but eventually there came a point where we said to them, "Listen, are you aware?" We just want to clue you in that there's this maths and there's English, you know about that. And you know that if in the future you want a job, you know, you might need a qualification. So I'm just putting it out there. This turned into a bit of an ongoing conversation about exams and they got a bit excited, unusually. They sort of said, oh, exams, what's that? So we said, well, and so we said, okay, well, GCSEs. Oh, a GCSE, what is it? This all ended up with a conversation. So they sort of, we quite like to do some GCSEs, you know, they're like 12 and a half at this point, 13, which is a bit young. We said, well, you don't need to do them for a couple of years, but maybe you could do one. So they said, well, we'll do one. So what you're going to do? Well, it turns out they speak a bit of Italian because we lived in Italy.
They're fluent in Italian.
They're fluent now, And so we said, well, why don't you do an Italian GCSE? Said, yeah, okay. So I go off and I look up an independent exam board and find one in Bristol, and we book an Italian exam.
They were 14
for a year's time.
Yeah.
When they took it.
Yeah.
They were 13 when they started studying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we download all the papers and off they go. They sort of lock themselves away in the room with past papers and all this kind of thing, and timers and the whole thing. Cut a long story short, they end up going and sitting and taking the Italian GCSE.
I sit in the waiting room, sweating, sweating, nervous, looking at the clock, fiddling with my hands, my heart racing. They sit there doing the splits on the floor, mucking about. I'm like,
the best thing is, we wait, they go in, they come out. The door opens, they come out, and they're going like this. They're going, wow, wow. And we're like, what? It was brilliant. We loved it. Dad, I just want to do GCSEs. I just want to do exams. They're saying. We're going like, we're like, yeah, what can we do next? And the guy who runs the centre is standing there sort of with a clipboard.
What is going on here? Yeah.
And a tie. And he's going, yeah. And I said, and then he says to us, he said, I've never seen this before. And he said, most children come here, they you know what I mean?
Dragged here.
So, you know what I mean? So, cut a long story short, we go back home, and it's like maths. Now, we haven't made them do any maths at this point. But we do have an account with Khan Academy, which is
I know Khan Academy. We've got that, yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And so they've got the level of maths of about a 8-year-old, 7-year-old.
When they're how old?
13, 14.
Yeah.
They do the entire 9 years worth of maths in 9 months.
Yeah. 9
years of maths in 9 months. They're just in there on Khan Academy. Do you know what I mean? You know, sitting there, just, you know, doing. Their starts off, I feel quite powerful because they're coming to me and saying, Dad, can you help me with this? Within 6 months, I can't help them with anything. Right?
It's way over.
They're into algebra, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I haven't a clue what you're talking about, sweetheart. You know what I mean? Off you go. You know, so 9 years in 9 months, and this cuts to an important point again about Summerhill. When I asked them, I said, you know, do the kids at Summerhill get exams? Oh no, most of the kids here get GCSEs and so on. So, well, how do they get them if they don't go to classes? She said, well, naturally, they suddenly realise, they learn that if they want to be a doctor or an engineer or a botanist or whatever, that they're going to need their exams. And what they do is they get interested in the subject and they start learning it. But what they've discovered is that the curriculum, the average time that they take to actually learn is a third of the average of what we do in schools.
Yeah.
This isn't a really important point for those parents out there who are thinking, you know, do you understand the ability to learn is not, you're only told it's 3 years long by the school.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So we just all buy what they're selling.
Yeah.
But, you know, my daughter did 9 years of maths in 9 months. They both did.
Yeah.
You know, to GCSE level, and they passed their GCSE.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really critical piece of, it's another thing that we have to break down, isn't it? This assumption that all children all have to learn over this time frame in this way. And it's just not true.
Can I just add something to that? And what they did say at Summerhill, which was really interesting, is that they normally take a really deep dive around the age of 15, where they kind of go, okay, what do I have to do this? And then they plunge. And so our son is about to hit 15, and he's not followed the pattern that our girls have done, but he's now tinkering around with maths, and I'm sort of waiting to see at what point he's going to take a dip. He's going to tick. And it's really, I still have that voice in me where I'm thinking,
please.
Do you know what I mean? And maybe he won't. Maybe he'll end up being a pro gamer and kind of or a YouTube star. I just don't know. Do you know what I mean? So it's a very interesting point. And just to go on a bit further about the whole GCSE things with the girls, the irony of it was that they ended up getting put into higher maths, and they did a year. They took GCSEs at like a sixth form college in a year,
which they chose. But which is important to say. We never made them go to college. They came to us one day and said, "Dad, Mum, can we talk to you?" We said, "Yeah, we want to go to college." And we said, "Okay, what do you want to do? We're going to fast track GCSEs." Okay.
They did fast track GCSEs.
We'll support you.
Yeah.
No,
brilliant. I love that. I love that. That's really important.
They loved it. They flew through it. They also really loved it because they they hadn't had that experience, you know. So suddenly going back into the education system, they were like, wait, what? And it was funny. It was intriguing. They loved different people talking to them and challenging their minds. They absolutely lapped it up. And somebody called Peter Gray writes a lot about this. He writes a lot about the transition from unschooling going into systems, into education systems. So often unschoolers who have had all that time playing and had all that freedom, when it comes to education, they just go for it because they savor it. They really, really want to. It's come from here. They've chosen.
Yeah, they've chosen it. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they've chosen, and they absolutely go. They just run with it, and it kind of makes so much sense. But it's so, it takes a long time to kind of for that penny to drop, and a lot of faith to let your kids kind of have that childhood playing and expanding in the way that it's not structured, and in the way that we're not taught that it's the way that children learn. So it's a leap for the parents.
I mean, it's also a leap for the parents. That's another thing which is important to just touch on, is the fact that when we're in my family in particular, he's the crazy son. He's the artist. And when we announced that we actually were abandoning schooling, there was a sort of reduction in temperature, let's say.
Yes.
Most people thought we were nuts.
Yep. I'm experiencing that now myself. Yeah, my wife and I.
Yeah.
And in my family,
that's difficult to experience.
I discovered after the event that they were all talking to each other about us. My sisters were still calling my mum up, and there was a lot of concern in the family. Had he finally lost it? And and then there was my mum, she's great, my mum, bless her, and we get on really, really great. But she would come around, and I caught her out doing things like when we left the room with the children, I would hear her saying, "So can you look at this number here and add this number to..." He was bloody well testing them, but there's a serious point here, which is that, one of the reasons we wrote the book was because we wanted other families to understand that they weren't alone, that there is another road that you can travel, and that it's important for us for you and us to talk together. It's important for us to put the message out there that there is another way, and talk about the milestones and the difficult parts. Your family may struggle because other people. We even had people arguing with us at parties. We say our kids don't go to school. What? And they kind of launch into us. So aggressively. It's a child abuse and
it's irresponsible and
there's a lot of collapsed thinking out there, which finds it very, very provocative to offer a very alternative view of how you can live as a family, and it's kind of important. But the irony is, the point about us is we've now been completely rehabilitated in our family because my mother famously said, after thinking about it hard, she said, "You really do have incredible children," as if the penny had finally dropped.
Yeah, it worked.
And said was, despite the crazy not sending them to school thing, because they're grade A students now, which is hilarious when you think about it. Isn't that hilarious? They're grade A students.
It's hilarious from the outside looking in, but actually the more we establish, and the wonderful information that you've shared today, the more we establish, and it's so hidden in plain sight, to be happy, to be safe, to be secure, to let them lead, and for us to just get out of the way, and I must point out this, because this is something I think is, and you alluded to it earlier, whether, it's not all of us are in a situation where we're not working 3 jobs and, mum's a nurse and she's out tonight and I get in and we're passing ships and, it's not easy for people. But also on top of that, there's a lot of, a relationship. You guys seem like you two, and this is why I asked about your parents earlier. You're in harmony, you're in sync, you're in a healthy relationship where you're growing together, and then that growing obviously spills out and everybody grows in that situation. And that is a huge, I think, underpinning of that environment. Yes. And it is difficult at this stressful time, maybe that's not the case for everybody, but in the end, if we all get out of our own way a little bit, the underpinnings are really that. It's just to let them be. And then they turn into grade A students and they come, I want to do exams. I mean, if you could, the average 15-year-old is not bursting out of the room celebrating the idea of doing exams because of the very things you've said, because we've just led them to it, because you're going to do this, because this is what you should do. And we miss the point entirely, don't we?
Exactly. And I just want to pick you both up on something about the grade A students. It's not about the grade A. It's like A.S. Neil says, I'd rather my son was a happy street sweeper than a miserable prime minister.
Yes.
They happen to have tuned into the education system. They like it. They're good at it. They're doing the education system well. And that's great. Another child might not do the education system well, but might tune into something else, might be a filmmaker. And, so it's not about the grades. I just want to say it's not about the grades.
No, I wasn't making the point. I was just saying how ironic it is.
Yes.
That our total, in a sense, neutrality about, I mean, if they came to me and said, I don't want to go to college tomorrow, I'd go, that's great. Yeah. If they quit tomorrow.
Either way.
Because it's not that. I'm just saying the irony was the outside world goes, well, your children will fail if they don't go to school. And I'm going, well, ironically, they're grade A students. So go figure, 9 years. How does that work? So, and it's not like they're lovely, but they're not geniuses. They're not Einstein. And we're not, boffin. I left school at 16 and never went back into formal education. And, blah, 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 blah. So, it's not as if there's a secret. We're some kind of anomaly to the system. We're really not, actually, in that sense.
Well, that's what I think is important for people watching and listening now who may be seeking information on their, their own situations at home now with the kids, is that there's not some indigo situation where we have to fit all of these, obscure creative or whatever it is. It is just to trust and to be there with them, isn't it? What I did want to touch on before we brought it home as well is you guys made a film during the early pandemic months. Boom.
Yeah,
we did. Yeah, which is, for my money, I really, really enjoyed it. A very kind of Beatles-esque psychedelic surrealism, kind of depicting the inside of a mind, and on very different levels. Essentially, I sort of took it to be kind of young people coming to terms with the speed of the world at the moment, and especially with what's happening in terms of pandemic, but social media, digital currency of likes, and what is my value. And you guys did that all together. I will link it in, obviously. It's, I think, just under half an hour, something like that. Really, you're all performing in it. Now, I did think to myself when you were watching, I was thinking, because I'm in a bands and I'm a bit of a control freak, so it's something I'm having to work on myself on as we create this environment of, and I did think to myself, I thought, right, you guys are all performers, and obviously you filming everything, and I thought to myself, bloody hell, I've tried to make videos for my songs in the past, and you've done some really creative things with shots and framing shots, and I thought to myself, I wonder in this family, was there times when you may be saying, right, no, we need to rehearse that again, and sort of finding yourselves going, oh God, are we on top of this, or is this a free thing? Can we get all the gear out? And we're not feeling it, right? Put all the gear away. How much of it was just flowing out of you, and how much of it became a bit of a project of work and rehearsal and so on for people to see? I'll probably play a bit as you talk now.
That's interesting. What's your take?
Well, my take is, you see, that's kind of, we're stepping into what Ant and I do professionally, so it was, in a way, was it an unschooling project? Yes, no, yes and no. It was a life project. So we're stepping in. So if I'm totally honest with myself, maybe, and when I'm stepping into that kind of professional role of writing, and kind of we co-directed really, and I think that we pulled the kids along into our world, and they hadn't done that they hadn't really seen that part of us so much. So do you think that's fair to say that? I think we so in a way it's not so freeform, it's not so unschooling. I think I'm extremely bossy when it comes to
as if you hadn't guessed that already.
but it's not so freeform. So it's kind of almost like we're in I'm in a different role. I'm in my professional role. I'm a trained performer, and I'm directing is something I can do, and visuals is something I can do. So it's kind of interesting. I think they probably maybe looked at us and like, what? And also we were quite demanding on them, which we're not normally. We were quite tough, I'd say, on some levels. And also because we've both been in the film industry, I think there are moments where we're like, it was frustrating because we were pulling them over, and they did brilliantly, and we also tried to drag our son into it. We didn't want him to be in it, and he was just like, do you know what? I don't want to be turned into a meme. It's not happening.
Yeah, fair play to him. Yeah.
But having said all that, within all that, when it came to the writing and everything, we cross-referenced with them all the time because we wanted it to be contemporary. And we talked to the girls a lot about, what fits, what doesn't fit, and do you have any ideas? And so they were very much, so it was half and half, in my opinion. They were very much involved in the process of it. But there's a lot to do when you make a film. So, making a film is an incredible learning curve for everybody. They had to learn about audio, they had to learn about acting, they had to learn about voiceover, they had to learn about shots, they had to sometimes film, they were doing makeup, I was doing costume. We did everything because we didn't have the budget to outsource it. And also we were all in lockdown, so we had to make everything. So it was an exchange, but I would say we drove it. And also the year before, we did a theatre show, a circus theatre show called The Last Fairy and the Black Crow Queen. And they performed with us, and we had other circus performers, and we drove the process. So it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit like everything changes a bit because it's our professional world. And there can be a bit of dissonance there. There can be a bit of like, So, but that's how I feel about it. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think this is this is a whole nother area to talk about, really, because what you're bringing out into the conversation here is really about what does it mean to collaborate with other people, and how does that travel over time through a family. So when you've got young kids, we follow the kids, like you said, and it's all that kind of thing. But of course, you're not doing that when they're 22. Right. So clearly there's a transition that's taking place. And so as the kids get older, everyone has to adapt. The behavior you're using with a 6-year-old, 7-year-old is not the behavior you'd be using with a 12-year-old. It's not the behavior you're using with a 16-year-old. And I think this is again, something that where, when I talk to parents, they're still trying to use the same toolkit with their 16-year-old as they were using with their 7-year-old. And they're wondering why it isn't working. So, and really, because, what about leadership? What about assertion? What about creative responsibility? What about, these are all things which are as much about having an adult life as anything else, right? So when you're a film director, you are in a position of responsibility. If you're a band leader, or if you're the lead, what I mean, whatever it is, these are natural structures which need to coalesce in order for things to get made and done. And so I loved what you said earlier. You said, I can't remember your exact words, but you sort of basically said, children are like sponges. They're watching everything you do. Well, that's very true. If you want to teach leadership to young people, you can give them a book on leadership, or you can be a leader.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a parent, if you want the kids, so they're looking at you and they're going, you can say, well, this is how you do it. But, they'll go, yeah, and now what are you going to do? And then they immediately go, well, he says that, but he doesn't do it.
Yeah.
So this is relevant really to your question, because the film was about us stepping into different roles.
Yeah.
Me stepping into the role of what I need, how I need to create my vision. And that means we change. I'm going to ask you to do things. I'll need you to say yes. I won't have time to explain.
Yep.
And that's very exciting, isn't it? Because what they learned from that, what we were modeling for them, if you like, was there's other ways to be in the world. And it isn't just about me constantly following them. I mean, I would say that we have quite a lot of tension between us and our kids now, in a good way, about washing up, about looking after the family, about opposing needs, about is there enough money for things. I mean, there's lots of places where we have to engage, and no, you can't have that because we don't have the money, or you can't, And so this is another whole part of the discourse about unschooling, really, about that
transition,
going along that transitioning into teenagehood, and how we must trim our behavior and the way we are, and we have to let go of things. We have to let go of infantilizing our children, because we want to when they're babies, and then we have to stop.
Of course. So when you're making the film, then, guys, was it when you're having those tensions and the girls are adapting to professional mum and dad, and we all hear the stories of when you're on a film set, you're on there at 4:00 in the morning and you're doing a 17-hour day, and we've got this time to catch this light and blah 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 blah. So
that's it.
They adapt. I imagine there's tension and, I'm tired. We've got to do it again. Yeah, I need to do it again. We didn't get it that time. But did you get to the point at the end, through that pilgrimage? I like to call those things pilgrimage. When I do videos for music and stuff, it can be a drag. It can be a drag because you're doing it and doing it again. It's a long day. But then when you see that finished product, when you see that production, when you see the bells and whistles and the coercion and the cohesion of all of that work and that the stress, and on that day, even look at this scene when you're swinging on the tree or whatever it might be. I love the sequence where you and the girls are trying to drag the suitcases, and I imagine the pain. It's hot. We've got to do it again. But then when they see it finished and it's in flow with everything else, the reward.
And I'm shouting.
I'm doing
it again. Shut up.
And
that day was stressful.
These are things I'm thinking, having been in this world myself, So and I'm attaching it to the future and what might happen with my kids. Like my little boy came in the other night. Can we do a podcast, Daddy? And can we do this? And can we do that? And we sit and we do it. And he's making songs. He's learning GarageBand at the minute. And I get on my GarageBand, try and find my project. And there's like 30 projects of 10 bars, 12 bars, and him doing Michael Jackson woos, and he's managed to put. But all by the by, what I'm getting at with you guys is with the girls. So that journey for them, I assume, at the time there'd have been, that transition's happening where they're thinking, oh God, this isn't as much fun as I thought it might be. But then they get to see it at the end. Then they realise, as all young people do, that work and that commitment results in something, and that will be there forever. That movie's there as a timeline sort of pinpoint of. I imagine in the future, a lot of learning would have happened there for those guys, and adapting, and then seeing that beautiful finished piece as well, which I'm showing as we speak.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And also, what I was going to say was, that when you go into stressful situations like that, that's where the quality of your relationship with the people you're working with matters.
Yeah.
The thing is that what we've always done with children is, because we've always treated them with respect, we've never shamed, blamed, or made them wrong. We've never, and I personally have always made sure to keep the communication clear. So if I've been an arsehole on set, which I can be. I mean, they even joke about it. Fascist photographer.
Really bossy.
I'm really bossy.
Like off the scale bossy, Sam.
But we've got this relationship behind us, and they know why I'm doing that, and they know that I'm reaching for something, and they know also that if I overstep, that I will come back and own it.
Yeah.
And I do. I've always, with my kids, if I've acted out and behaved badly, and trust me, I have. I've always made a point going back to them saying, what I said, what I did, that was not okay, and I want to apologise to you. And if there's a makeup I can make to you.
Yeah.
I've constantly been cleaning that thing. And that is the investment you make in the relationship, because ironically, then you can get away with a lot.
Cool. Well, it's the trust. You've built the trust. You've built that trust, and that, when we're in the unknown, but we're there together. We do find that trust, and especially when you're younger, looking up at your dad, or your mum, you know, somewhere along the line that comes through. And for me, as you mentioned earlier, Ant, looking back on your childhood and you come to a young manhood and find punk and you start to listen to lyrics or different perspectives, or you're in that other house and you see that other way, you start to connect the dots in your own life and you realise, oh, maybe that trust or that openness wasn't there for me. And I know I feel like that, you know, and then I start to realise, oh, my behaviours when I went in that direction and was, you know, maybe wasn't a great direction for me. A lot of that was because that trust just never got built, and I didn't have anyone to trust and I need to find it. But there's a fear in not having that trust. So then you act out and maybe you push things away. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And for your girls to joke with you and, you know, fascist photographer and what have you, that's lovely, because that's what it is. We can joke about it. We can poke fun at dad, you know, and still arrive at this wonderful end product.
So I'll tell you something else. You just triggered it. You know, as the girls are getting older, people would say to us, "Have they entered the terrible teenagers yet?" And we'd say, "Well, no." You know, they say, "Oh, don't worry, they will. They will." And a year ago, so are they? How is it at home? No, things are great at home. Have they gone into the terrible teen? No, they will, and they've never had.
Yeah, they haven't.
And everyone said, "No, don't worry, you'll be rowing, you'll be fighting, It's never happened. It's never happened. And I think I put that down to the fact that we did our best to, you know, not give them cause to say that their freedom was curbed. You know, what's to rebel against? We'll probably be there rebelling with them if they want to rebel. You know, because that'd be fun.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
They wanted to go on XR marches, and we went on XR marches with them, and we dressed up we went in costume, and you know, and we've just sort of said yes to everything, really. You know, you know?
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you again for your time, you know, that you've given not just to me and my little quest with my wife and my family, but like I say, viewers, listeners, learners who might come across this conversation, and it might give them that little bit of internal belief or a little bit of trust or a trigger just to move on and maybe grab a book or visit Summerhill or whatever it might be. And I'd love to probably do this again with you guys if you'd be up for it, you know, as I go through my journey, because I'm right at the start, you know. We took our kids we took our kids out in November, I think. And so, you know, we really are at the beginning of this journey. But thank you so much for your time. Obviously, the book, Jump, Fall, Fly, you have got all sorts of stuff, as you've mentioned, professionally. So where do we send people to find you if you want to be found? And I will link everything in.
Yeah, we want to be found.
We love being found.
Jumpfallfly.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, from there you can click around and you can find the book on there, and the book's on Amazon as well. There's a new edition coming out shortly as
Excellent.
well, updated.
And on Instagram, you can find us at Unschooling the Kids.
Yeah.
So anybody who wants, and I'm really happy to respond to people, because I kind of there weren't people there for us when we were starting out, and I was like, I had no roadmap, so I really like to sort of help people if they need.
Well, that's the whole reason we're having this now, because I did that search in there.
I was going to say something to you, Sam, as well, which was, first of all, you know, it's great that you're doing this work and doing this podcast, and there's a lack of men in this conversation. You might have noticed that. There's a lot of, I don't know what that's about. I think a lot of fathers struggle with, there's a lot of women who get in touch and say, I really understand and I want to do it, but my partner won't go along with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for there to be more fathers talking about this journey and what it's been like to be a dad in the unschooling frame, you know, over time. So that's great to see you are a man. See,
Thank you.
No, but I just think that's important.
No, I agree. I agree. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really humbled by being in your company. Your energy is just so pure and true and abundant and colourful. And I know from, like I say, looking through the Instagram and seeing the girls, and not your son so much, like you say, he's out of the way a bit, isn't he? He's doing his thing.
So I have to respect that. I kind of sometimes want to put him up, and he's like, if you put me up,
No,
I'm
I
like,
love
fair
that.
enough.
I love that because that gives you that other dynamic, doesn't it? To learn and to deal with and to be with. And that's wonderful. It's great. So thank you, guys. I will link everything in the description. I will link the book in. I mean, you sent me a PDF of the book, which I've been reading at the computer, but I've ordered the book. I've ordered a copy from Amazon myself. So I will give that a shout on the podcast as well. I will send people where I can to you. I'm going to be covering this more and more and more in the future because, like I say, it's my experience. And I think people will really benefit from at least being privy to these conversations. So thank you, guys. And we wish you well in this crazy upside down world we are in.
And you.
Yes, take care. Bye, guys. Bye.